Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in the New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I won't do as always this time. I want you to look at the previous shows to determine what in la catch and namaste actually means and how you might apply those in your own life and experience the benefits from it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce this week's guest, and his name is Joseph Carrabis. He is a wonderful gentleman. He's got an autobiography in the guise of fiction, fantasy, and science fiction, magic realism, and other associated dark arts. So we're going to talk about that for a moment too, and I think that's going to be fun. He talks about authors in fantasy and fiction and writing and science fiction. He's a master storyteller with a sharp sense, dig that, of human. He's a musician and extraordinary pizza maker. And we can talk about that too. He's a featured capitalist or contributor on Biz Catalyst. He's an author, creating words in various shapes and sizes. He's a producer of Dear Katie, which is survivors on the Page Book Club. He's the editor of Dear Katie, Survivor Stories, and he's also an advisory board member for the Center for Multicultural Science in Los Angeles, California. Joseph, glad to have you here.
Glad to be anywhere. What can I do for you, sir?
At any time, right?
Yeah.
Well,
one note I have to make.
Oh, please do.
My last name is Carrabis.
Carrabis.
Yeah. We changed it when we came over here, got off the boat,
Okay.
I was very fortunate. Only 13 of us got off the boat. If somebody says their last name is Carrabis, I go, you must have been from the same town back home.
My wife, who's from St. Petersburg, Russia, she talks about how their names are structured, and that originally the last names were from the towns they were from.
Yes. And
that the additions to the last name with the progeny also referred to their patriarchal progeny or process, which I thought was kind of interesting.
No, so long as it's progeny and not prosody, we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So looking at that, talking about beginnings, right? We generally look at how a person goes through the process of life and establishing that cognition of their inner awareness and how that expands and manages to filter through their personal outer life and the practical and pragmatic things that they're able to accomplish with them. So early on, I'm sure, just based on what I know of you, that you had some initial inklings of that inner experience. What was that like, and what, about when did that occur, and what was your experience at that time?
My recognition of an inner life, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that inner connection, that's something else that, at least at that time, you weren't sure anybody else knew about.
I'm still not sure anybody else knows about it. But anyway, I was born blind, and have only been able to see as other people see. Wow, look at the world. But about the past, maybe at this point, 4 years, through multiple surgeries. And I still need reading glasses.
Sure.
So, I was born blind, but in the family environment in which I was born, my parents had no great use for a handicapped child. And I was also misdiagnosed as being, back then the term was retarded. So my parents were going to have me institutionalized. And my grandfather, my mother's dad, said, no, I'll raise him. Well, my grandfather, it turned out, back in the old country was a mystagogue. He was someone who taught the younger people the mysteries, mystagogue. And there I was. So he raised me until he passed away. He and my grandmother raised me until he passed away. They passed away. And part of the mystery traditions he taught me, he raised me in, were, for example, you don't need to be able to see to function. You need to be able to know. You need to be able to be aware. And people who've worked with the visually impaired know about such things as facial vision, and some people who are visually impaired actually have learned how to echolocate. They can be moving along and you'll hear them. And most people think it's a nervous habit. No, we're actually seeing where things are. But we're creating an oral image of our environment.
Well, it's like you're, just because you've been denied one sense, then it seems, and this is often the process, the other senses are magnified to compensate.
Yes, and my grandfather spent a lot of time teaching me how to magnify those senses.
What a blessing, though. I mean, in those kinds of environments, not unique, but definitely unique in the way that somehow there was this guiding factor that put you in a place that was so enriching rather than diminishing.
Yes. So he taught me, for example, a love of the earth. He taught me how to be with the earth as a, for lack of a better term, a dirt farmer, but never have called him that. He had a bunch of friends who he routinely, we went around and visited, and they provided the loving, caring environment that my parents chose not to give me. And each one of them would bless me and train me in some aspect of a mystery. So having a rich internal life was something I was raised with, literally, until my grandparents, excuse me, my grandfather passed away, at which point I went back to live with my parents. And I'm not sure how much of this you want your audience to know. So if it gets to be...
Whatever you think is important to share.
Okay. I am a survivor of childhood sexual and physical abuse. And a lot of my years with my parents, they basically did their utmost to destroy everything my grandfather had given me. And then when I left my parents' home, I began traveling. And lo and behold, when I was willing, I would recognize this place looks awfully familiar. And I remember hysterically, I visited this woman at her craft store. Didn't really know who she was. I just felt I had to go into this craft store. And I went in, and she just looks at me and she says, "You're finally here. We've been expecting you." And I went, "Oh, I'm sorry?"
Huh? What?
Yeah. And she goes, "You're John's boy." And my father's name was Joseph as well. So, John? No. And then I went, "My grandfather, Giovanni, John." And she was one of the people he would take me to routinely to learn her teachings and philosophy.
Our art, right?
Yeah, her art. And, you know, as I matured through my late 20s into my 30s, all of this stuff is reawakening in me. And I said, this is not how I had been living, was not how Grandpa wanted me to live. So I actively pursued what he had taught me and did my best to remember and sought out the people he had introduced me to, those who were still alive, and worked with them. And they, yep, sure, we're waiting for you to show up.
Oh, cool. You know, it's funny. We're not that dissimilar. I was orphaned at birth.
Yeah.
And although I was adopted into a wonderful family, dad was 32nd degree Mason and mom was a school teacher. So I had the outer presentation and encouragement to develop my intellect and my experience and my physicality and athleticism, those kinds of things. And yet there was this absence of the inner, and my younger life was rich with inner experiences that I attempted to talk to them about and would always get dismissed as a result. So it wasn't until same age as you, late 20s, early 30s, I finally got the opportunity to redirect my life back to that inner world and begin exploring it again. So and I'm really thankful for that. I don't have any regrets or judgment on how it was, because it was perfect. It gave me what I needed. Now, how did you, from that point in recognizing that, okay, I'm being recognized and I'm being waited for and people are anticipating, let's unpack that a little bit. What did you find or did you come to know of that connective tissue, if you will, in the greater thoughtmosphere, if you will, of activity and how you were transitioning or transiting, navigating even through it?
So if I understand what you're asking me, how did I increase my awareness?
First, acknowledge what was happening. How was that interpretation? How did you cognate the process? Well, and then what did you do with it?
I decided to turn my life around through a very dramatic incident. And it was an incident of road rage. This person severely cut me off on a highway. And I ended up in a ditch. I got back on the road, took the exit, followed him off the exit into the parking lot he was going into, and followed him to his space, and he started driving around, and I'm following.
Oh, you were following him, probably.
Yeah. And at one point he stopped, and this was back when you had bag phones, not cell phones, not iPhones.
Yeah, I remember those.
So he picked up his phone and he's pointing at it, and I just snapped the antenna off of his car. So I said, go ahead, make your call. I'll be right here. And you want to know something else? And I'm talking to him just like this. I said, you want to know something else? At best, it's going to take the police 25 minutes to get here. Do you know what's going to happen to you in the next 25 minutes? And that is when I swear, I am not kidding, I heard, this is not how Grandpa wanted me to live. This is not what he intended for my life. This is not what he taught me. And I'm looking at this guy who's white and shaking in his car, and I walked away. And I called the police, and I stayed there, and I said, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. And the guy admitted that he had cut me off. So the police said, yeah, okay, go your own way.
Yeah, fortunately, nothing drastic happened, but
Right.
that voice that came through, the intention that you must have had at a core level of doing the right thing in the moment. Of course, the right thing was first to kind of like, not necessarily gently, but to confront him. It's like, look, dude, you just did this. And of course, I'm sure you recognize that. I just wonder what the hell was going on in his head, right? As to
Um,
what's going to happen next as a result.
one of the
But you
things
handled it exquisitely.
one of the things that Grandpa taught me was not necessarily live and let live or forgive and forget. It was hold people accountable.
Mm,
Don't blame, don't condemn, don't evaluate. But if somebody did something and you know that event caused harm to them or to you or to others, you did this. You need to make amends. So in this case, that was turned on me. Was I prepared to do what I wanted to do? No, I can't do that. Because I was raised in the environment with my parents where physical abuse was a daily experience, I could not hurt someone. I could not physically be violent to someone just to be violent, just to get back. No, come on. Really?
right.
Seriously, Joseph? Is that what it's all about?
Yeah, revenge isn't all it's knocked up to be, right?
No. And it's never a lot of fun. Once you really get into it, it's just, no, it's not good.
Well, that's if I may, not fun, right? We do so many things that aren't fun, and yet we're not aware enough to realize, hey, this isn't fun. Why am I doing this?
One of Grandpa's lessons: go for the good.
Mm,
Always seek the good. You don't necessarily have to have a great, fun, laughing time, but you have to, at the end of the day, be able to say it was a good day.
yeah, look at yourself in the mirror and be
Yeah.
proud of who you are.
And if it was not a good day, if you recognize this was not the best day you had, can you understand why? Can you feel? Can you send your heart searching down the road, so to speak?
Mhm.
What caused this? Did I cause this day to be bad? Well, you know what? Number one, good and bad, that's evaluations. There is no good, in my opinion, there's no good and bad. There's
Right,
simply,
it's how you think about it.
exactly. So here I am. I need to make an evaluation. At the end of the day, I'm lying in bed, whatever. If it was not my optimal day, rather than, well, this person did that and the car had this problem and over here and over there. No, what do I need to change about myself so tomorrow I will have a better day? Don't change anybody else. That's not going to be working for you. If somebody else wants to change themselves and they say to me, and this has happened, Joseph, I don't know what it is about you, but whatever it is you've got, I want it. To which I usually reply, single malt scotch. Is that what you're asking about? But if somebody comes to me and says, we've been working together, I've known you as a neighbor, whatever, and what's going on? Okay, fine. I'm happy to talk with you. Happy to give you what I can, share with you what I can. But that's part of a blog post I wrote about, is today the day you make oceans?
Mm,
One kind word, one kind smile, one nod, one acknowledgement, one wave to a person who's having a bad day. The universe is, in my opinion, the universe is always in balance. So what I do, my hi, how are you today? 7 million billion light years away, the universe in balance says, ocean. We're going to make an ocean on this planet so life can exist here.
mm,
That's actually a field very few people know about called quantum economics, where everything is in balance.
right, right.
But that concept of Kayanisqati, I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Kayanisqati means life out of balance. And Sinisqati is the other one, life, I'm sorry, I had it backwards. Sayana is life out of balance. Kayana is life in balance. I haven't spoken Hopi for a long time.
Oh, they're special to me. I've years ago, I had a short relationship with a woman that was a daughter of a past president of the tribe. And I got introduced to it, and that was really what I thought was wonderful about the relationship. She did not want to have anything to do with her culture. My daughter and her daughter conspired, right, to bring us together. And then had been so interested in it because I'd read the book of the Hopi, and I had some experiences in other ways that led me there because I was fascinated in the cultural history and the spiritual knowledge that they carried.
Yep. Very much so. So the concept of life in balance and life out of balance, and everything wants to, in my opinion, again, everything wants to return to balance. If we think of our lives, ourselves, as a mobile, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, hangs from the ceiling and different,
right.
Yeah. They function best. They are most attractive. They sound, if you will, best when they are in balance. And one of the things we know is there can be a heavy weight over here and way over there, a little tiny weight, but because of the distance away it is, that tiny weight will balance this heavy weight. That's so
Depending on where the fulcrum is.
Exactly. We need to figure out where our fulcrums are. We need to figure out if I have some aspect of myself that's way over there, did I put it over there? Did life put it over there? Meaning I put it over there without realizing it? Do I get to drive back? Do I need that part? Or is that a part of me which wanted to do a road rage thing?
Right.
No, I don't need that. So are there other elements of the mobile which can take its place and acquire balance, put me back whole, make me focused, centered?
And as you just mentioned, I would say yes. And as you just mentioned, it's your choice. You are the one in control of it all, not some other thing. It's like in that quantum economics realm, it's unqualified energy. And it's how you choose to qualify it as to what matters in the results you get.
Yeah.
Now, let's unpack that because you mentioned a really fascinating topic to me, and that's quantum anything. Let's look at quantum economics from that standpoint. And I know your intention and the meaning of that and translation is far beyond the financial realms.
Oh, yeah.
Because this everything's built on relationships, right? Everything doesn't matter, person, product, thing, place. It's all how we deal with each other in the lives that we choose to build or having to deal with. So quantum economics at this point, I would think, would have a lot to do with truth telling, especially in the current environment with what's happening coming out of COVID and being faced with this now distribution of information that maybe hadn't been heard yet in regards to the activities of a group of people on the planet that think they know what's best and what they've been doing in the background all of this time while pointing at others in the process to alleviate. It's like that old, be careful where you point your fingers, you got three of them come back at you. Well, you're going to be exposed eventually because what you're pointing at is a diffusion or a redirection from you because of what you're doing. So the classic art of war strategy, right? Get the two fields that, divided and fighting amongst each other. And then as a third party witness, you can do whatever you want in the background, depending on the skills and abilities that you have and the networks. So we're facing that. What's truth telling today to you?
Many years ago in internet time, that could be like 5 days ago. But many years ago, I was interviewed by a California group for one of their podcasts. And they said to me, what is the one thing, if you could tell business people the one thing they need to be able to do, be aware of, what would it be? And I didn't hesitate. I said, be honest with themselves, be truthful to themselves. They're going to lie. They're going to, it's an unfortunate element of modern business, I believe. It seems that, and part of marketing is that you will beguile, lead people astray.
Yeah, you obfuscate the truth in order to sell shit.
Yeah. So what's key there is if I have a product I want to sell to you, for example, can I be truthful to myself, with myself, about that product, my goal for the conversation, my intention? I can, as long as I know what I really want to do, and that's a very crucial part, then I am powerless. I'm limitless, I should say, not powerless. I'm limitless.
Just the opposite.
Yeah. I'm invincible because I have my own knowledge. I am self-aware. The trouble with that is people have egos, people have identities, and they may say, well, I have to make believe that this is a really good whatever. This is the best hard drive. This is the best phone. This is the best microphone on the market. Even if I know, no, there are better. There are better than our less.
You're following the prescriptive notion of whatever mission and vision is of the company.
Well, that's the thing. The vision of the company and the vision of the individual, the mission of the individual and the mission of the company. I'm not sure if you've been on our website, my website, but there is a page called Principles. And when we had, actually all of the companies we've had, we had a set of principles that grew over time. And these were things that we believed that we adhered to, we used. And I had CEOs of companies, big and small companies, contact me and say, anybody who puts that on their corporate website, I want to do business with that person. Also had CEOs and marketing people contact me and say, yeah, that's interesting, but that's for everybody else. That's not for us. Sorry, we can't work with you. That's not how it goes.
How would you interpret those two responses, the why of those responses?
Why people gave those responses?
Yeah.
My experience has been the people who accept them and acknowledge them and are willing to work within that framework, they know that it's possible to be better for themselves, for others, for their company. The people who say no, they've got a goal which may actually not be helpful to them or others, but it's a goal. And it's kind of like, I want to have the largest car company on the planet. Excellent. What are you going to do with it? Art Linkletter, who you may remember.
Oh, yeah.
I watched him interviewed, and at that point in time, he said that he knew his net worth was $45 million. And back then, whoa.
That's huge.
Really. It still is, but back then it was, whoa. And the interviewer said, do you always keep track of how much you have? And he goes, and this is Art Linkletter, kids say the funniest things, the Art Linkletter show, the guy we all let into our homes as kids, right? And he said, of course I do. And I make sure I know what other people have too. That's how you keep score. Whoa. Was that a wake-up call? you know, and I'm now I'm in total confusion because wait a minute, art, kids are the funniest people. Wait a second now, hold it, you know, that's how you keep score. Whoa. That was the great wake-up call to me that the inner and outer self, what we present and who we are not always the same.
Right, right.
The
And this is one of the
personality and
things,
the identity are not always the same.
very true. And that's a stark contrast and just um, the cognitive dissonance there is amazing, or at least apparent cognitive dissonance, because we think in that inner side that that wouldn't happen because it's not an outer experience. And yet we do live half inside and half outside. We just are bereft of what's going on inside most of the time. And would you agree? And is that what you found? And if so, what do we do about it? How have you been able to bring that out?
I'm not sure I agree completely with it. Part of my work, my self-work, if you will, is to become more and more aware of my inside, of my inner self, and to create, if you will, that balance. One of the things that I share with people is there's a point around us, which is the barrier of selfless and selfish. Selfish is, that's mine. It's like my dog. My dog, did I look at that? Then it's mine. Did you look at that? But then I looked at it again. It's still mine. I'm on the bed. This bed is mine. I don't care where you sleep, but this bed is mine. You know, that's my dog.
Right, right.
But I'm not saying I'm more evolved than my dog. I'm sure he would argue at times. But there's that selfless, and that's the other side of this boundary, if you will, where I will give to you everything beyond that. I will share of myself. I will share of my worth. I will share of, you know, whatever you need beyond there. Yes. But in here, inside that sphere, no, that's the Joseph that I keep for myself. And now the thing is, and this is something people sometimes have a challenge with, that sphere is not the same size for everybody.
Oh, no,
My wife, partner and princess, you know, that's my skin. And most times with her, it's actually inside my skin. But the great thing about having a life partner who's been with you for a good part of your life, is, and I actually wrote this in a book, they know things about you they won't tell you to your face. That to me is a high level of respect and trust. And sometimes I will say to Susan, have you ever noticed this about me? And she goes, yes. Help me change that. I want to change. Help me be better.
right.
How would you like me to help you? Good question. If I knew that.
Right. Now, this is where I see you reflecting a really great degree of inner awareness, right? You want to know, you want to be your best self, however that looks and however that can happen. And the questions are self-driven. You inquire rather than having others tell you, right? Whether asked or unasked, to do so. Where I was going with that half inside and half outside actually was probably more true that it's all inside, because the outer is just a reflection of what's going on inside at a very deep level, and even beyond what we're talking about with the self-assessment, right? How do you, and this is one of the things with the global peace movement that I'm hopefully doing my best to lead at this point. And the two principles we have, one's don't be an aggressor and the other's be a good human. I would even take it so far, and I speak to the point of being a better human, right? Good humans got us to where we're at, right? We need to be better humans. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by what you're talking about. We are self-assessing enough to where we look at what's going on outside of us and it's not quite what I'm intending, right? And then you start asking questions as to, okay, what am I missing? Now, how do you ask those questions internally, and what kinds of responses might one anticipate getting, if you can give a few examples of how it's been for you? I know your wife is one of them, and I have one that does the same, only she's a little more direct. She sees something, she lets me know, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Again, I go back to things my grandfather and his friends have taught me. The first lesson, the first principle, if you will, is lower center, relax, breathe.
Mm.
So how do I become aware of things? Well, there's a technique which, for lack of a better term, I would translate to levels of awareness. And people who have studied traditional martial arts, not the kind you find usually in American schools. You have to really go looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just true all over the globe. Doesn't matter if you're studying African martial arts, Asian, South American, Native American martial arts, because they exist everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
A level of awareness is something you learn. There's a term for it, Carrabis, which literally means to separate oneself. So here I am, here. And now I can be here, observing myself.
Ah, the key point, the observer.
Right. And again, that's my, part of that comes out of my background in cultural anthropology, because I was schooled as a participant observer. Yeah, child of the 60s, you betcha, I was there.
Yeah, me too, right? Although I went through it in the 70s. I chose, it's like, oh, wow, this is cool. You know, there's this part of me that can watch what I'm doing.
Right.
And reflect from a different place that I found most people don't even know about.
That is where, in my opinion, having a guide, you know, when we are on our journey, we need something to help us find the correct path, or a path which works for us. I won't say correct path, a path which works for us.
In the moment.
What's that?
In the moment, because it changes.
It can be a GPS, it can be a map, it can be someone who says, you got to go down there, take a left, you know.
Or it could be somebody says, hey, have you thought about this?
Right.
Right.
And the key is, are you receptive to that moment? As you say, in that moment, that's the beginning. And here that I am here, this sack of flesh, do I have enough awareness right here to hear?
Mm-hmm.
Make word for an Italian, ascolta, means to listen, ascolta. My grandfather would say that to me all the time, ascolta, ascolta. So pay attention, learn to listen. And okay, that piece of information resonated. Literally, my body lined up with it. I can feel. And again, this is something he taught me. Maybe, you know, people say, okay, Joseph, you were taught these things starting when you were 3 years old. Come on, give us a break. And my response is, no, anybody can learn this stuff.
Absolutely.
You just have to want to learn it.
And therein is the key.
Right. So learn to listen. And okay, some people might say it feels right. Some people might say that sounds good. I like the way that you said that.
Mm-hmm.
That looks good to me, you know, whatever.
I resonate.
For me, it's, and I feel my body go, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's almost like a similar process for me. It's like in that moment, my there's a heart pulse, and it's undeniable.
And here's a crucial element for anybody out there in your audience who's looking to investigate these things. And I'm not saying come to me, I'm just offering this. You have to make sure the person who's helping you helps you figure out how you do it, not how they did it.
Right. And that's the key to being a master coach.
Yeah, Western education is very much, based on the way we teach now really hasn't changed much since the 16th century. What we teach has changed, but how we teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can trace the roots all the way back to the Socratic method.
Yeah, it's prescriptive rather than exploratory.
Right. So, for example, I have a background in physics. This is the path that came to that. Well, there were, and I'm even as a younger man, there's no other path that gets us there. And finally, my professor said, fine, go find it. Okay.
Right. Permission.
Yeah, really. I was just fascinated by, yeah, okay, great,
Right. And then you come back with, okay, here's what I think I found, and what's this sound? And because of the boxed thinking, for lack of another, and you've been outside the box reading labels, so you know what's in there. And when you begin to pull the lid off and dump the box out, which are those who don't necessarily they don't know what is inside of them, right? And now you're beginning to expose these other possibilities. Those responses aren't often pleasant.
My teachers, the majority of my teachers, because one of the greatest things a teacher can teach you is that they're not supposed to be your teacher.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And one of the joys to me for people my grandfather introduced me to, people I've discovered on my travels, if I was able to do something differently than the way they did it, their first statement was, can you teach me how you did that? I want to see how you did that. Can you teach me that? There was that amazing willingness to, wow, that's new and different, but you got to the same place. What was your path to get there? I'll give you an example. I study piano, and my instructor we're going to do this. And for example, it will be Fly Me to the Moon, that great album, right? And he said, this is how I want you to do it. I said, yep, okay. So that took me a day to do it. He suggested, I said, I can put so much more in here. So I began experimenting with, anybody who's a musician in your audience. I began experimenting with the 5-6-1 combinations and the 2-7 combinations, et cetera, et cetera. When to switch from a major to a minor key, what's the correct scaling. And when I last saw him, I played that he wanted me to play, and he sees me smiling, goes, okay, go ahead, what else? Let me do this, tell me what you think. And I'm playing it for him, and goes, wow, that is, yeah, show me how to do that. And I was like, yeah. See, that's what it's about.
Well, here is a great reflection too. My wife's a piano teacher. She was trained in Russia. Irvin Laszlo, piano prodigy. Listen to me. I'm kind of dyslexic when I talk sometimes. These kinds of elements, like my wife says, she taught the solfeggio scale at 5-6 years old. Right? Most of us don't know what that is yet. Then there's and I've heard her talk to a lot of her students about, okay, the way Bach wrote was such that you have the opportunity to give yourself to the piece of music. as opposed to just playing the notes. There's this imbuing of self into the music, just like you did, and your instructor saw, it's like, wow. And when you can do that, it's just amazing. Now, if I may go back to just reframing the observer and participant at yet another level, and that being the third aspect of that Trinity. And that's the voice that comes, whether it's a voice, an impression, a gut feeling, whatever it is, in addition to what the observer is seeing in the self and vice versa, to where there's this three-way conversation, let's say, where the participant's having one, the observer's having another in his observation, and then there's a third that says, well, what about this? Right? Do you experience that? Is that something that, in addition to the observer and the participant?
I'm not sure if this is what you're describing, but one of the things that I say to people is all of our experience basically comes down to an equation. And it's an amazingly simple equation. A plus B equals C.
Mm.
A is where you ask yourself, what do I think happened? B is what happened to me. C is what really happened. So according to your model, we now have observer, participant, voice, reality. So
close.
Okay.
The reason, so my experience with that is, and I agree with you, first of all. So, and there's another level that I want to achieve, and that is that there is a being a better human voice, right? That once you realize these things, then what? And then there's this inkling, whatever you want to call it, of this third presence that doesn't necessarily state what the reality is of what you've created. It asks you to be more in that process because it's clearer, even clearer than the observer. The observer can only observe what it knows and how it knows to observe. And then that third aspect gives another layer of the ability of the observer. But it comes from I'd have to say maybe same yet different place, because all of these are contiguous in this multidimensional model that we have in a quantum world. Does that make more sense in the description of it? And it's kind of like where the indigenous philosophy, the three brains, right? Where you tuned in with the gut, you feel all the vibrations around you because that's how we're built. Then you determine the resonance of it in the heart and then what to do with it in the head. Whereas most Westerners have no idea what the body is. They just make choices and drive things with a push or pull mentality rather than flow. And where the first to the third brain activity creates more flow and hopefully puts it in better order so that it edifies you rather than diminishes you. Now that gut level intuition, internal connection, this natural balance you were talking about, right? This to me seems where that's coming from. That third voice is, okay, how do we balance this? How do we grow into a more of a congruent natural order of self? Does that make sense?
I accept that is your belief. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just, no, that came from an experience that I'd had of just watching and so there's a fourth there that was yet another observer, right? And yet these kinds of things is like, when it happens, there's like you experienced it's like, whoa, right? It can be disconcerting at the same time. It instills a sense of awe as to what else is available that we're not paying attention to.
I can't say it's ever been disconcerting for me to have such experiences, mainly because every time I have them, I have the way they come to me, the way they manifest, if you will,
Mhm.
there is an overwhelming sense of peace and quiet
Yes.
and solace.
Yes.
I dare say if someone were to hook me up to a EEG, they would probably see what is recognized as the God spot firing like crazy.
Mm.
But yeah, okay, however you want to describe it, that's fine. It is more a question of, here's a way to think of it.
Okay.
When we practice anything, I don't care really what it is, when we practice anything, whatever's inside of us is going to come out. If we are a gifted basketball player, but we have a lot of poison inside of us from whatever in life, we may be a gifted basketball player, but we're going to play the game poisonously.
We're going to foul a lot.
We're going to, be aggressive beyond the need.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my heroes, Michael Jordan, he didn't let anybody get away with crap on the court. If you were on that court, you were there to play your best game. However, if he knew you had a weakness, if you were on the other team, oh yeah, he'd go after it. But if you were on his team in practice, you got to work on that. Let's work on that. And that to me is amazing. That is, he found such joy in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't what he did, it was who he was. So I mean, I've known physics professors who were poisonous, and part of that poison manifested itself as what is now called imposter syndrome. They were never confident in their knowledge of the subject matter. So as you were saying earlier, anytime you offered an alternative, no, that's not it. Because I worked with Bohr. Well,
Right.
you are a Bohr, but if that's, I'm not sure.
Nice. That was a nice throw in.
So, the voices for me, even when I heard that voice saying, this is not what Grandpa wanted for me, it took from me the aggression of the moment. I could no longer be aggressive. Those instances may not always be a voice, but those instances still come regularly. I have worked hard to make, well, okay, here's another thing that goes in with what I do or what I believe. We're talking about levels of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
One of the people who taught me how to do this kind of stuff, he was way up here, really. And I said to him one day, what happens when you get there? And he said, then I look for there. Always evolving, always continuing. And I personally believe that part of our, not mission, part of our being is wanting to be there. I work really hard to get here. Okay, but now that I'm here, that's my everyday life. And I remember being down here, but now I'm here. What do I do now? Well, you take some time to enjoy yourself, get the e-ticket ride at Disney World, right?
Right.
And then,
yeah, and if you're not having fun, you're probably not doing the right thing.
Then you go to the next one. Then you go to the next one. And
now, might we say that this is also kind of a process of ascending at the speed of surrender?
That's a fascinating term. I say it a little bit differently, but I think it's the same thing. I say I'm being dragged kicking and screaming to where I want to be.
Absolutely the same thing, just a
Mhm.
different perspective of it, right? Because in the experience, that's what it feels like.
Mhm.
You're being drugged, kicked, screaming, defiant. No, no, no. Well, okay, right? I can't tell you how many things I've gone through, and I'm sure you've had too, that you resist, and persist, right? And then you finally realize, oh, I'm fulfilling the axiom. Okay, how do I not resist? Well, that's the surrender. And then that other source, which is actually you in a higher form, says, okay, how about this? And you're like, oh, I don't know, but let's try, right? Because you don't know. It's a complete mystery as to the kind of results. And this is where expectations and outcomes get in the way of the process. You don't know what they're going to be. All you can do is say, don't know, let's try it, find out.
I think a lot of people stop there because of fear,
Absolutely.
you know. It's kind of like the picture of Ezekiel going beyond the realm of the universe and seeing the machinery of God.
Mm.
How difficult that was to break through, because really that picture is
Let
actually,
alone articulate it to the rest.
it is an image of getting beyond your own consciousness to that higher working, the machineries of God.
Mhm.
Um, but it is a constant. I don't. If it is a constant challenge, I'm the one putting up the roadblocks. You know, so I have to be
Finding
the
the
one.
answers when in the questions, granted, and I'm sure that you adhere to this axiom that questions are far better than answers, right? They're more important. uh,
Yes.
Specifically, and I think you'll like this, and I don't know that I've mentioned this before on any of these, but since we're talking about the quantum economics, I had a question about the Trinity, because I grew up with it. I looked around the world. It's ubiquitous in most of the religions. And what's it mean? Where'd it come from? What's the origin? And in a guided process I was going through, there was a facilitator's process developed by William Swigert back in the 50s called multi-level awareness. And this had nothing to do with the process. It was just my prep work and getting silent and going within to get ready. Well, my guide, which I had met as a teenager, shows up and waves and says, come. And so I feel like I exit my body and I go into my light body, and I'm traveling across the universe with him. And eventually, as I'm talking with him, hadn't seen him for a while, so we had a brief discussion. We end up at this solar system that's got 3 suns with 10 or 12 really lush green looking planets that are dwarfed by the size of these suns. And the suns are white, gold tinged with kind of rainbow sparkle hue to it. And my guide Zephyr and I feel like Jodie Foster in Contact, coming out of the wormhole, and I got tears streaming down my face because I was in awe of it. And then I hear these multiple voices speaking as one that say, we are not only your forefathers, we are also the forefathers of your solar system. And right away, I had wanted to ask more questions, and Zephyr says, nope, that's it. You got all you need. You'll figure it out. And then back we come. And so on the way back, I'm talking with him, and I instantly got, okay, that's the macro. The micro would be the proton, electron, neutron, and yet hydrogen doesn't fit. So I'm still working on how hydrogen fits. I understand it's the most prevalent gas in the universe. It powers the sun, and it's also the bonding agent for our DNA. Is a possible consciousness actually moves through it because it is so malleable and ubiquitous? I don't know yet. I don't know. They even know what consciousness is. So I'm sure you're probably in that place too. But that gave me a greater understanding and possibility of, okay, well, maybe this consciousness that we don't understand permeates the space in between what we now know to be vibrating strings, and helps them to self-organize when the intention is to do so, which is that question you ask of, and I ask of, okay, how do we be better humans? How do we more fully embody that presence that we know is possible through all of this historical and anthropological references. So, these are things, as I mentioned, it's like, okay, I don't know. Let's explore it and find better questions to unpack it with and find out whether it matters or not. Even though we're all vibration and nothing matters.
Yes, Joseph Rael's Being in Vibration, great book.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds, or where I am currently positing what you're describing, is what is known as Penrose consciousness, and that is the actual energy exchange that goes on inside mitochondria. Once Penrose came up, excuse me, with the string theory, multidimensional, 13 dimensions, and sometimes he goes up, sometimes he just goes crazy. He goes, oh, I was at 25. That's strong. Let's put him in there. Shortly after that, he began looking at the energy continuum that goes on inside the very tiniest parts of us that keep us alive, and posited that those energy exchanges to function must fire through more than 3 or 4 dimensions. They must exist through 3 or 4. Is that where consciousness is? Okay, let's expand that a little bit better. Or a little bit further. And I'm really hypothesizing. I'm just postulating stuff out there.
Oh, I love it. Let's go.
Yeah, don't have, your local quantum physicist person come in and say, he's a schmuck. No, this
can often resonate more than we imagine.
Well, this to me is the freshman year of philosophy, 2 a.m. we've had too much beer conversation.
Or other.
or whatever.
Yeah.
What if that Penrose consciousness is the dark energy that's in the universe? We know there is more dark energy than there is, quote unquote, light energy. Why do we call it dark energy? Because we can't figure out what it is. Therefore, It's got to be dark. Oh,
Right.
It's lucky we don't call it the sinister energy.
Here we go into the dark arts mentioned earlier, right?
Hey, I live there, man.
Yeah.
So, it's as Shakespeare wrote, there is more to the universe than you have dreamed of.
Horatio.
And what's wonderful about that is in our dreams, we can create universes.
Or experience them.
Or whatever, depending exactly what you want to do. But yeah.
Right. So
let me know when I'm boring you, because I can.
No. This is a fascinating conversation for me because we're talking shop. And in that shop, there's also the Nepean Close model that you're probably familiar with, 9-dimensional, right? Where they posit that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. Doesn't eliminate other dimensions, right? Says they are there. It just limits it to the human experience. Now, what I found really interesting congruence with was an experience I had back in 1989 of a multi-plane awareness technique that takes you through, this is 3rd dimension, the physical, right? Takes you through 9 other planes of consciousness of which we have bodies on, and we integrate with those and then drop them off on the various planes as we come back. And it also goes into the beyond that 9th into something greater, but in the human consciousness, we can barely comprehend the 9, let alone what else is available experientially. In 2010 is when Nepean Close posited this model. In 2018, I discovered it by preparing for an interview with Jeffrey Mishlove and trying to grok what he had talked to others about that I could bring in as relevant in the conversation that I knew I was going to have with him. And yet, so here's this 9-dimensional model based on a human framework of what's experienceable, but it ties into exactly what you're saying, is that individuated core essence is throughout, not just 3 or 4, but this model suggests is throughout those other 9, which means 12, because we start with the first, second, third, right? Then, so these kinds of things, and maybe there's a 13th, maybe that's the nothingness that Wilbert Smith is talking about, of his conversations with people from elsewhere that he put in his memoirs. He was the, you're going to love this, he was the project manager for, or director for Project Magnet, which was Canada's UFO investigation program in the 1950s, funded by the Ministry of Transportation. So it brings in yet another element that we don't often consider, and yet with recent events over the last 5 years, now even governments have recognized, yeah, these guys are here, we just don't know how or why, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. And they may or may not. Yet we've at least advanced to that. Yeah, not only is it possible, we see them and some even experience them, as evidenced with Wilbert, highly respected scientist. They expressed to him that we begin with a point of awareness, and our reality is built upon the development of that awareness, which I find fascinating, and it's exactly what you're talking about. So how does that fit, and is that positing confusion, or is there some elements of that that might possibly make some sense? I love the pregnant pause.
Well, I'm curious to know, you know, how much is worth sharing, how much your audience really is fascinated by, because now you're delving, or you're bumping into anyway, chaos theory. You know,
patterns unrecognized.
You know, the collisions that seem random. One of the great things that I was taught, of the many great things I was taught, one of the things that always made me laugh was you get far enough away from something and it's a straight line. You know, you live, I'm not sure exactly where you live, but I'm in New Hampshire. So let's say
you're just outside Phoenix.
Okay. There are a lot of ways I could get from here to you to there, right? A lot of different ways. And if I'm doing the traveling, oh my God, you know, listen to that GPS. In 7,000 miles, take a left. What? No, come on. You know, it's one of those types of things. On in 3 miles and 6 feet, well, I'm not recalculating. So, okay. But now, let's say I'm flying at 10,000 feet. A lot of those turns go away. Okay, I can be looking down at my other self driving the car, but a lot of those turns, getting out of my driveway, going down the street, getting on the highway, they're gone because they're so small from that perspective. Now I'm going to go up to, you know, the space station, the ISS. Wow, there's maybe 3 or 4 turns in that entire thing. Now I'm going to go to the moon. Now I'm going to go to a different galaxy. It's a straight line. As a matter of fact, you go far enough away, it's a point. Be aware. I share this with people. Be aware. You go far enough away, everything's a straight line. You say to yourself, I have no clue how I got here. It was a straight line. The universe's idea of a straight line is you don't want to see. Do remember that in nature, there's no such thing as a straight line. So if you think it's from here to there, great. I'm glad you had 10th grade geometry, but throw it away. It's not going to help you right now. And then you get into Riemannian spaces and everything else. No, it really gets crazy. But it can be a straight line. It depends how much you want to investigate. How much do you want to change of your path? Maybe it's a point. Maybe once you recognize that we're all basically smart monkeys on a flying rock going around a nuclear reactor, then you got to recognize, what am I doing here? If my life is from this point to that point and that's it, and it's a straight line, that's not a lot of fun. And we're going to go back to fun, having fun. But if I branch off and explore, I may come back, but I'm going to go over here and explore. I'm going to spend some time with Zen. I'm going to spend some time with this person. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to have a chocolate sundae, with the brownie in the bottom of it.
Mm.
Oh, got the real whipped cream, right? With malted ice cream. And of course, all of your listeners are like, oh,
Right.
um,
Probably won't find that at DQ, but you can make one on your own, I'm sure.
Yeah. Maybe DQ, when did they used to have the peanut butter buster bar? Anyway.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a video cast or just a podcast?
Yeah. It's video. Yeah.
Okay. So all of your,
I give it time to ask.
Well, all of your people in your audience, yeah, Zen and I, we have gray in our beards. We didn't just dye and put it there just now. It came to us through many, many days of making mistakes and learning from them, we hope.
Mm.
So, go and explore that. Okay, maybe you come back. Maybe that's the change of the course, that from the moon, from a different galaxy, wow, that was a big course change. I can see that from here. That is where Siddhartha became the Buddha.
Yeah.
That is where you went from being the child of a 32nd order Mason, I believe you said, to Zen. Were you born with the name Zen?
No, I wasn't. My given name was Bruce, and I found out from my birth mother when I met her at 61 that she would have named me Bruce too. And Bruce actually, it means dweller of the thicket. I love to get in the thick of the things. Zen came through a meditation I was having. Actually, it was a really short one. It was a conversation I was having with a friend of mine that fell quiet during a full moon, June of 1988, and I closed my eyes and went inside and I asked a question: who am I? I heard his chair move. I opened my eyes up, turned to look at him. First words out of his mouth: you are Zendor. Same instant, my second sight kicks on and I see this huge stone arch doorway cast on a starscape. And the door is slowly opening towards me and I hear, door to what is. What the hell you do with that, right? And so I told him what was going on. I put it on the shelf. Well, several years later, or a couple years later, I got the opportunity to produce and host the first version of One World in the New World, and it was just called One World at the time. And I used Zendor under Bruce Benefiel as a door to what is, because I was peering into the depths of what makes us afraid, angry, ignorant, and immobile. And lo and behold, 6, 7 shows in, one of the guys on the set who happened to be a sick called me Zen. And it just cascaded from there. I was uncomfortable as hell for a while because I had issues with people changing their names in the 70s. Right. So here I'm faced with the same thing. Be careful what you judge, because you're going to end up on the other side of it. Right. That's the balance you were talking about. So in that balance, I had to finally say, okay, and just let it flow. Now, what it gave to me was this ability to move further into me and the expectation of it from others just simply because of my name.
Mm-hmm.
And it was profound in its effect, still is today. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Or maybe I did change it for the world.
Big change. Could see it from the moon.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of running short on time here now. And thanks for asking the question. I don't share that much because it's pretty freaking weird. And yet,
no, you haven't touched on weird yet.
Oh, good. Well, I'm in great company then, and we're going to have another conversation in the future. For now, though, if you were to leave our audience with some tasty tidbit of transformative tenacity, what might, not that I like alliteration, what might that be?
I go back to something we started the conversation with. Be honest with yourself. Be true to yourself. You can lie to anybody else. You can tell them stories. You can go off the rails, so long as you know what is true for you. And if what is true for you is, I had this experience in 1988, and I realized my name many years later, a few years later, I realized my name was Zen. If true for you is, I was a mathematical physicist for a number of years, and I said, this sucks, I'm going to do this instead. And you decide to become a, I don't know, a Buddhist, live in a monastery somewhere in the Himalayas. Good, do it. If that is what's inside of you, be honest and truthful. If you deny who you are inside, you kill not only what's inside, but you kill the outside as well. You cannot survive in the world and truly bring things to the world if you're not willing to accept what is inside and work with it. You may not like it. If you don't like it, great, great. You know you don't like it. Excellent. That means you can change it. I don't like that about myself. Some people, I love it when somebody says to me, I don't like the fact that I do that. Good. That's a good starting point. What can we do to help you? I'm not going to put the burden on them. What are you going to do about that? You lousy son of a, you know, you see what you just did? No. You said you didn't like that. I said, this is not how Grandpa wanted me to live. Awareness, understanding, you know, whoever the voice was, the next voice you hear caught my attention in that moment. That's when I was ready to hear it. Couldn't have heard it 10 minutes earlier driving down the highway. Would never have heard it 10 minutes later with that guy's throat in my hands. Right then, that's when I heard it. Act on it. Put everything down, back away. Find your true point of balance and relish it, enjoy it, expand it.
What a resonant field that was. Thank you so much, Joseph. And I look forward to more. Real pleasure. Just magnificent conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure, sir. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Great. Namaste and in la catch. Thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.